Welcome to the 30-minute hour. It's the personal development podcast for the seven-figure entrepreneur who's looking to level up and become unstoppable. I'm your host, Eric Twiggs, your procrastination prevention partner. Joining me as always, you know him as the super CEO, the business strategist extraordinaire, and all-around good guy, Ted Fells.
Happy Monday. Happy Monday. Hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving.
That's right. Happy Monday. This is the post Turkey Day episode of the 30-minute hour. And hopefully you take time to reflect on all the things that you're grateful for, all the things you're thankful for, and really feel those feelings of Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I still have leftovers.
Left,
Absolutely.
leftover feelings, yeah, of gratitude. Yes.
That's it. That's it. That's
Yep,
it.
I
How
have
about
leftover.
but I was just thinking leftover turkey and stuffing and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, there's no mystery as far as what's going to be for breakfast, lunch, and dinner for the next few days.
That's right.
All right,
Turkey omelet.
that's right. Turkey cereal, turkey omelet, turkey, turkey, turkey. But we're not here to talk about turkey, Ted. We're
No.
here to talk about how to lead during a time of crisis. Because I think you really know what you're working with when you see somebody that's dealing with a crisis. And not only that, when there's a crisis, the people that are following you are looking at you. They're looking at, okay, what's he going to do now? How is he going to respond?
Yeah.
And so we're going to talk about what the right response looks like. And this is definitely one you need to lean in on. Even if you're saying to yourself, you know what, Twigs, this isn't for me. I've never had a crisis before. Just stay tuned. Just stay tuned. It's inevitable. So we'll go ahead and introduce our guest, who's an expert. He's a consultant. He's been consulting for more than 40 years on this topic. He's done it with several big time organizations, the Coast Guard, you may have heard of them, Bristol-Myers Squibb, Merck, Novartis, quite a few big time organizations he's done consulting with. He's currently a consultant to Accenture, and they've developed all these online courses. And he's done this great webinar on positive influence, finding people who can help you to be your best self. Now, he's co-authored or authored some 16 books. 16 books. So he's also the co-author of Positive Influence, the leader who helps people become their best self, and Positive Influence, leadership in a time of crisis. And that's really what we're going to talk about today, leading during a time of crisis. So please join me in welcoming to the 30-minute hour, Glenn Barker.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Ted. Looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely, as am I. Welcome to the show. It's truly an honor to have you on. So, I've been doing some research and looking at your online presence. I noticed a theme of positive influence leaders. So what is a positive influence leader? Let's start there.
Okay, it's a good place to start. Um, Let me answer the question by telling you a story, actually, my story. And by the way, a lot of what we try to do is using people's stories, what happened to them, and what they learned from those experiences. And so I'm going to share some of those stories, some of the quotes that people gave us, because it's um, quite frankly a lot more impactful than simply giving you a list of here's the 5 ways to handle a crisis. Um, so, for example, I'm going to tell you my story, and I'm going to take you way back to my first real job, my first job out of graduate school. Um, and I come to first, uh, my first uh, performance of appraisal meeting, my first performance appraisal meeting with my first boss, Larry. So you know how this goes. He talks about what he thinks, what kind of job he thinks I've done, and it's actually going pretty well. He thinks I've done a good job, and I would say, as an aside, um, my job basically was doing what they generously called research. I would be given a topic, I'd look up information, and I'd write a report. I look up more information, write another report. Quite frankly, just between us, it was pretty boring. But I did boring well. I was good at boring, and Larry thought, "Wow, this is good." So we get to that point in the employee evaluation process where he wants to talk about my development plan. What do I want to do? What do I want to be? Where do I want to work going forward? And I had thought about this because I knew it was coming up. I knew all the questions. And so I had been watching the folks across the hall in leadership training, and they seemed to be having a lot of fun. They were traveling all over the country and out of the country, doing workshops, coming back with all kinds of stories about those workshops, the people they met, of course, travel stories, all those kinds of things. And I said, gee, this sounds really kind of interesting. So I said that to Larry. I think I'd like to try that. Could I actually sit in on one of their classes? So he said, Glenn, as a matter of fact, he said, I am traveling down south next week, and I'm going to be conducting two workshops and workshops in two different cities. He said, you can come with me. He said, there's just one thing. I really can't justify your travel expenses unless you teach something. So, my lips start to quiver. You're like, what? I said, Larry, I don't know anything. How could I teach something? He said, we'll figure it out. And he figured it out. He figured out something that he knew that I knew and that he thought I could teach. And I did it. Now, what did he do? Or what didn't he do? He didn't say to me, Glenn, well, why don't you teach this 2-day class? I'll give you my notes and my slides, and I'll sit in the back of the room and I'll give you feedback at the end of the 2 days. No, no, no. What he did was he gave me a 2-hour unit on the afternoon of the second day when the class was all warmed up and things were going well. And it was pretty easy for me to do that. And I did do something that I knew, and it went really well. And I finished that and I said, wow, this is what I want to do. So what Larry did there was he positioned me for success. And that's one of the things that a positive influence leader does. They put you in a position to be successful. As I said, he didn't throw me out there and say, go teach the class. He put me in a position where I could be successful and do it and learn from it. Now, of course, he gave me feedback, but so that little episode, that example of someone being a positive influence leader essentially changed the trajectory of my life. From there, I said, that's what I want to do. That's the person that I want to be. And that's got me started on doing corporate training, leadership development, team development, led to organization development, led to a lot of other things. So you need those kinds of people within your life that do that sort of thing, that are a positive influence on you in a very specific kind of way. So yeah, so that's I think an example of how that person works. Makes sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I always think about, like, you look in the sports world, right? You take somebody, a quarterback, football, they get
Right.
drafted, they could
Right.
be in one situation and look like they don't even belong in the league. But then they go to another team and
Yes,
they get a coach, and the coach positions them for success, maybe changes things around to what they
exactly.
like to run. And all of a sudden, it looks like a completely different player that everybody's ready to give up on.
That's a great example. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just curious
Yeah.
from your experience, what are some things that our leaders who are watching now can do to position their people for success?
Well, there's a bunch of things that we can do, and we identified sort of 4 different types or 4 different ways that leaders can be a positive influence. One is to be supportive, to say, look, and that's what Larry said to me. Look, I know you can do this. I got your back. Let me show you what you need to do. I'm not going to do it for you, but I will be here for you when you need it. So being supportive and believing and being able to project that idea on the other person is absolutely critical. Another thing is to be a teacher, what we call a teacher positive influence leader, who teaches you what you need to know in order to be successful. It can be subject matter. It can be how to do something, how to fix this, how to install that. But it also can be values. What's the right way to do things? How do you be a positive influence yourself? Knowing the culture, being a participant in the culture, being a positive person within that. That's the kind of thing you need to learn. And by the way, you need to learn the culture of the organization that you're in. So yeah, there's one thing that the manual says over here about how things are done in the organization. And then there's the culture, which is what? How it really gets done. The third thing is what we call sort of the motivating positive influence leader. That's the person that helps you find your true purpose in life. And that's what Larry did in that example I gave you. He helped me find my true north, my reason for being, my core purpose. And that's what we need from a leader as well, who finds that, helps you find that. The last is the role model, somebody who you can look at and say, oh, that's how it's done. You watch that person and say, that's the way you talk to people. That's what you say and what you do. And by the way, those things need to be aligned. You got to walk the talk. The really effective leader, particularly the role model, because people are always watching you, and particularly during a crisis, they're watching you to see if your actions match your words. And that's what they do. And by the way, I'll pick up on Eric, your sports example, and I'll give you one of the ones that, and there's lots of them in sports, because we all grew up looking up to certain players. Michael Jordan's probably the most impactful role model, certainly in basketball, but probably outside basketball. The really smart people who look to him as a role model, and by the way, Kobe and other people who grew up in the era watching him, learned that what they learned from him was not to try to copy his jump shot, but to copy his work ethic, to be the person that was the first person in the gym and the last person to leave, that you didn't leave until you could hit 90 out of 100 foul shots. You didn't leave the gym until you do that. The work ethic, what he did, I could go into this because, big fan of his. That's those are the kind of the 4 different types and the ways you can be. And all of us, by the way, all of us have the capacity to be all 4. We happen to use 1 or 2 of those types more than others, but we all can learn how to do all 4 of those. And you can learn by studying it, by getting feedback, by going through training, by working for a positive influence leader that can teach you those kinds of things.
Yeah, you said a lot there. I mean, one of the things that stands out to me, that whole thing of "I've got your back," I just think that's powerful, because if you work for somebody, you feel like they really got you, they have your back, you're more willing to take risks and take chances and
Yes.
and know that this, somebody's covering you. and
Right.
that you won't be making a career limiting move, as they say. So I think that's a powerful thing, and hopefully our
Yes.
leaders are now
Yeah.
inspired to be that positive leader and get away from the whole.
Yeah. And by the way, just I'm going to pick up on that thought because that does make a lot of sense and it resonates with a lot of the things that I believe. If people always talk about empowerment, we want to be an empowering leader. We want our people to feel empowered. Um, you can't people can't be empowered unless they feel you have their back.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you say you're empowered, that means when you're out there and I'm not out there with you in the field while you're doing your job and you take a risk in doing the job and talking to a customer or something, and it works out, or maybe it doesn't work out. Um, uh, but because I feel, and you've told me that I'm empowered to make a decision on the spot when I feel that it's necessary, I got to feel that you have my back during that time. Because the foundation of empowerment is trust.
Mm.
And that's I think, Eric, that what you're talking about there.
Yes, well said. The foundation of empowerment is trust. That's tweetable. Well, I guess it's called X, so that's Xable now. So
Put that on a plaque.
it's
Your wall.
Xable, Ted. The foundation of empowerment is trust.
You heard
All
it here
right.
first, folks.
No, that's facts. I really like that.
Okay.
So now I'm just curious, like, how did you come to research and write about leadership during a crisis?
Yeah, good question. Our first book uh, was about to be released it was May 2020. This is the basic book on how to be a positive influence leader, including a lot of the things I just talked about, those 4 types or 4 styles. And what happened? COVID-19 hit in February of 2020. So in May, we figured nobody was going to be interested in reading about a leadership book. They had much more important things on their mind. So we delayed the release of it in cooperation with the publisher and the like. So we had already talked about doing a second book. By the way, my co-author is my son.
Mm.
How about a great experience that's been? So it's been phenomenal. So Michael said to me, Dad, we're sitting right in the middle of a topic that we ought to be researching, and that is this crisis, to see whether what we think about leadership applies during a crisis. So why don't we do that? And I said, yes, why don't we do that? So that's how it got started. And then we used a lot of our contacts to reach out to leaders in industries and businesses that were most impacted by the virus. So that would be what? Healthcare, real estate, hospitality, meaning hotels and restaurants, education. Those would kind of be the major ones. Plus, we included a lot of other business nonprofits. A lot of community-based nonprofits were impacted by it. So that's how we started out doing this, is to say, why not? We're right in the middle of it, and that's when we started interviewing people, CEOs and other senior leaders in those particular industries and businesses.
Mm. Okay. So what did you find were the biggest challenges that these leaders faced during the
Well,
crisis?
yeah. Well, we asked them about challenge. What were the biggest challenges that you faced? And they told us a number of different things. And the way we work, Eric, is kind of bottoms up. We hear a lot of these stories, we take them all in, and then we say, okay, what do we do with those? And so we ended up with about 6 categories. So in other words, we didn't start with hypothesis and categories and tried to fit what we learned into those categories. The categories emerged from what we learned. So the things were like the emotional toll and the stress that this whole crisis took on everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that. The need for clear and an effective communication messaging during this time to get to our employees and say, this is what's going on. Clearly, the loss of business, the worry about the health and safety of our people. But probably the best place to start was the emotional toll and the stress that this took on people. So let me start talking about what some of the people told us during this time. And because I want to give the quotes to you and to your followers. For example, Mitch, who was a CEO of Seville's, which is a major commercial real estate company in New York. He said, my biggest concern was dealing with the mental health of our people while trying to maintain our positive, upbeat culture. Many leaders during this time had to look at themselves and say, let me look at the stress that I'm feeling here, because people, as I think, Ted, you were saying, the people started to look to you to see how you're reacting to this whole thing. And so people had to look at the stress on themselves. Many of them chose to try to be strong and not show things, not show how they were really feeling. And later they said, let me just say, I'm in this also. I have family that I'm worried about. I go home at night and I'm worried that I'm bringing this virus home to people who I live with. So all of those kind of things. Remote work started this time. It ramped up very quickly. I'm sure we all remember that. And remote work, which worked for a lot of organizations and types of businesses, if everybody worked in the same building, like it was a hospital or financial services or something of that sort, that worked fine. Not every business, can do that. A restaurant can't do that. People have to come in to a restaurant. So, anyway, so remote work during this time ramped up, and that also provided a lot more stress. First of all, the workday never ended because you couldn't say, I'm out of town or I'm at a meeting. Everybody knew where you were. You were at home, right?
Yeah.
The days were long. They became 10-hour days. And what else was going on? So in many households, both mom and dad were working. And so they're bringing their work home and they're trying to figure out, well, where, you sit over there and I'll sit over here. And what else was going on? Who else was home? The children
Kids.
were home from school and
Oh,
they're
Glenn.
trying to learn.
Bringing back painful memories, Glenn. Oh man.
Yes, I'm laughing, but it wasn't funny at the time. So, so there's a lot of, because the kids are trying to learn remotely and trying to figure this out. And meanwhile, you're also, as a parent, trying to help them learn during this time. And you're going, boy, they changed math. I didn't learn math this way when I went to school. So, and, and quite frankly, it put a strain on family relationships because there was a worry about, either one of us going to be laid off? Are they going to cut back on our pay? A lot of, how are we going to pay the bills? Things of those sorts of things were going on. There was a lot of stress during this time because of that, and stress on relationships. And so that was one of the big things that happened during this time. Um, Exhaustion, depression, people in need of, and particularly in low income, women took much of the stress was on the woman because the woman tended to be responsible for the education as well of the children during this time. It varied, but a lot of that went on. Adding to this was what was going on nationally. The murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and the hundreds of thousands of people that were in the streets that were protesting. And it impacted a lot of organizations because people who worked for those organizations were either in sympathy or out there in fact in the streets, and that impacted what went on in the organizations and stress during this time. So for example, there's a couple examples that were shared with us. The CEO of Nordstrom's, Eric Nordstrom, he flew to Florida during this time to meet with local police after an employee was mistreated by some local police officers. He met with the employee, he met with the other employees, he met with the police and resolved the issue. The CEO of Verizon, Hans Vestberg, had a video call with all employees about how he felt about what was going on in the country, because he realized that many of the employees were concerned about what went on with these murders and the impact it was having on them, their family, their friends. And in this video call, by the way, which you can call up on YouTube, he said this, he told employees on this video call, this is not acceptable. This kind of behavior is not acceptable in America. And he frankly broke down in tears. I've seen the video. It's dramatic to see a CEO crying during a talk with employees. Jody McLean, who's the CEO of Eden's, someone we interviewed, is also a real estate company that owns and operates a bunch of shopping centers. What she did, which was pretty clever, she sent every employee of theirs Martin Luther King's letter from a Birmingham jail. And she set up a bunch of discussion groups, small groups in all of their locations and all of the stores with a facilitator that get people to be able to talk about it. So it didn't happen offline. It happened in an organized kind of way, and people could express how they were feeling during this time because there was a lot of feelings.
So it sounds like the common theme. So like if the employees are dealing with a crisis, the leader needs to be able to empathize, right? Because I can't imagine like the CEOs you just mentioned,
right,
were really studied up on Martin Luther King and all this before this happened, but they worked to kind of see it from their people's perspective. So
right.
is empathy the answer?
Empathy was it. And you know, quite frankly, what they realized that it's okay to express how you're feeling. You don't have to be the strong silent type. You can express it and put it out there, and that's a good thing. And communication was another real challenge. How do you communicate in this kind of environment when, first of all, in many cases, people don't work under the same roof? Second of all, information was changing all the time. We were getting mixed messages. We were getting conflicting messages. Social media was driving people crazy during this time. And so what some leaders did was, because they were afraid of giving out information and then having it corrected later, they would wait and say, until I get complete information that I feel confident with, I'm not going to communicate with employees. Wrong. What we learned during this time, and what the smart leaders learned during this time, is to, and one of our guys said this, and I want to share it because the people we interviewed have said it a lot better than I could. Fellow named Rob Zimmerman. He works with a company called NAES. They operate a whole bunch of power plants around the country, and you know, power plants, they've had some crises in their time, so they know what they're talking about. He said, you can't be paralyzed by the fear of giving the wrong answer. We had to get comfortable with this. This is what we know today, but stay tuned because it may change tomorrow. And as soon as we know, you'll know. As soon as we know, you will know. but stop being afraid of being, being incomplete and having, because what was going on, all kinds of information was coming from all different sources. We had the World Health Organization and the CDC and the federal government and the state government and your local government were all putting out information. And by the way, if you were part of an industry association like the National Restaurant Association, they were putting out directives, on how to keep the place clean and how to use sanitizer and the like. It was a really extraordinary kind of thing. So, clear messaging became a real challenge during this time, and dealing with it was a real challenge for people. And they had to learn, as I said, to get comfortable with, but to get comfortable with maybe changing information. But the real problem they learned is that don't deceive, deny, deflect, say, oh, everything's okay. It'll be fine. We got this under control. Sometimes it's better to say, we're not sure, but when we are sure, you'll learn more about it and we'll get it to you. And the smart leaders did that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think, just to stop you there, I think this is a good point. When you talk about don't be afraid to give the wrong answer, make sure you've got clear messaging, get comfortable not having, all the information. I think that doesn't just apply to a pandemic. There's other things that can come up,
right? Exactly.
That's useful. So Ted, I know you've worked through a few crises in the last 27 years of leading your company. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's always good to give some information, right? And like you said, Glenn, just this is what we have. We'll give you more as we give it to you, because what happens is if there's no information, then you got people just kind of making up stuff. You got because as you were talking about the different news outlets and all that, you didn't mention like the water cooler, right? Like somebody's there that just telling you what they know about what's going on, and I heard this, I heard that. So then people kind of run with those things as well. And that situation was that time was just such a unique time, right? Just people just, you just think about times like, even like, let's say like, even like with 9/11, like when that happened, it was just like those major events like that, people are just trying to get information from wherever they can. I think a lot of times people just want things to add up too, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think you're right. And we also didn't mention social media, and we didn't mention cable news, which was putting out all kinds of conspiracy theories. And so to Ted, to your point, when you are not, as the leader of the organization, communicating, somebody's going to fill that gap for the employees. And people were around the water cooler say, I heard last night on XYZ cable show, blah, 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 that somebody died from taking the vaccine or something, that kind of crazy stuff that was going on. And so this is why the smart leaders did what they did. And by the way, even when you get information like one of the guy who's a general manager of a Marriott told us, he said, I would get the information from the CDC, and that was good. It was pretty, that was
reputable source.
That credible source. Exactly. He said, but I couldn't, make copies or email it to my employees. What I had to do is sit down and break it down into language that they could understand, because this is all, arcane medical terminology. And so he had to spend time breaking it down into the essence of things that would be relevant to somebody who worked in a hotel.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of challenges there. But let me talk about what leaders, the really good leaders, did during this time. What did they do to address those challenges? They got out of their office and walked the floors. They got out of
Mm,
the office and walked the floors where the workplace allowed that. In a hospital, for example, we interviewed a couple of CEOs of hospitals, and they were walking the floors, and because that was a lot of stress, as you can imagine, and maybe you even experienced in hospitals during this time. And he
yeah.
would stop him. He would stop doctors and nurses and aides and technicians and say, how are you doing? How are you feeling? What do you need? How can I help? Oh, you need ventilators. You need N95 masks. You need I have to be honest with you. If I get them, you'll get them. But right now, we've got supply chain issues, et cetera, where it's
Mm,
difficult. And boy, there's some war stories that we heard about that during that period of trying to get information. But they they were out there, and realizing that people were under stress, they would provide counseling. The staff psychologist, staff psychiatrist, um, religious leaders who worked in hospitals would be providing those kinds of services. But they were out there being present, being visible, being accessible. And by the way, when you ask somebody, how can I help? And they tell you, you better get back to them. You better answer that. So it's not just, you know, kind of the political stance. You better be very practical and get back to them because, again, people watch what you say and what you do, and they better be aligned.
mm,
Um, all this time, so employee engagement went up, and so in situations, for example, this great guy that I interviewed, his name is Mike Axiotis. He's the CEO of a company that owns 21 Red Robin restaurants. Now he couldn't walk the floors because there's 21. So he would just pick up the phone and call the general manager of a restaurant and say, "How are you doing? And what are you doing? And how can I help?" And he's also got that kind of personality where people, he's legit, and people understand that and would recognize that he was trying to help, and he wanted to know that somebody cared about things. One of the things people learned during this time, that their responsibility to employees did not end at the plant gate, at the front door, at that they it was the total employee that they had to be concerned about, because they were going home and their life continued during this time. And so people, there was more of this, it sounds a little, cliche, but a community of caring where it started from the top and the leaders cared about the employees and they had to communicate that. And those are the kinds of organizations that didn't that where loyalty was maintained, and they didn't have this great resignation issue that was, popular, that was current during a particular time. The people stayed with them because they said, this is a good place to work, and that's what we wanted to do during this time. In fact, I wrote an article about it based on the research that we did, and actually we can make it available in the show notes, called "Creating a Great Place to Work," in which I
yeah.
compared two restaurants, and how they handled, and one did and one didn't create a great place to work. And they were staffed up, all during this time. The one that did. Um,
Yeah. It said I do want to stop here too. So
yeah,
you talk
sure.
about
Yeah,
the great resignation. And I remember they did a study, and the majority of the people who left made negative comments about their boss and weren't happy about how they communicated or how they handle it. So a lot of times, we just assume that, oh yeah, it's just time, just the pandemic. People just want to work from home. But no, it's really about the leader and the boss being
right.
positive. So a lot of people who are listening to us now, they're asking, so what? They want to know that, okay, this is great information, but
Right.
Glenn, how can your book help to address how we should lead in a time of crisis?
Yeah. Well, a couple of things, and this is already being done by some organizations. Um, they they're buying the book, and by the way, it's a pretty short book. But at the end of every chapter in the book, we not only summarize what's in the chapter, but we put 4 questions at the end of each chapter that help you take what's in the book and apply it to your organization.
Hmm.
So let's say there's a chapter on challenges, challenges during a crisis. We asked the question, well, what were the challenges that we faced in our organization,
Hmm.
and how did we address them? So it takes the information and applies it and helps you apply it to your organization. So that's one of the things. And so what some people are doing, for example, is very simple. They have a regular staff meeting, and each meeting they take a chapter and have everybody read it beforehand, come in and use those 4 questions to facilitate, like, what can we learn from this and apply it to us. There is, at the back of the book, there's an organizational assessment where you look at and come up with what were the biggest challenges that we faced in an organization, because it will give you lots of questions that will lead to an answer as to the biggest crisis that we faced, and then look at how did we handle those crises, and if we had a do-over, we had a mulligan, how would we handle it better next time?
Hmm.
Yeah. So that's one of the things that's what we suggest doing this. The so what is, and by the way, I've been I've written a lot of books, but I've been a practitioner my whole life. So I was out there talking to people, always consulting, training, all this. So all the things that I write, I try to make write in such a way that people can use the information, not just say, oh, that's interesting. But, oh, that's interesting. Let's see whether we can use it as well. So that's what I would say in terms of the kind of the so what, because that's what drives me is the so what. What can we do with this information? Because, as I said, I'm a practitioner. I work with practitioners. I don't do, oh, isn't that interesting kind of research. I mean, I don't mind reading about it, but sometimes, but what I'm really looking forward is that for is this. So, but that's a great question, really.
Yeah, that's good. So that takes it from, because I mean, there's a lot of leadership books, right? And it's a lot of theory that's out there, but it sounds like you package this so that it's practical. So that's
Right.
okay. Here are these 4
Right.
questions. What can we do?
Yeah.
What did we
And by
learn?
the way, in the first book, we had those 4 different types or styles that I mentioned earlier. There's a self-assessment in the end of the first book. And by the way, the publisher was nice enough to take that self-assessment and put it into a separate booklet so that you don't have to, it's much easier to work with to have it in a separate booklet. And you fill it out and you get a reading on what is your preferred style among those 4. And then there's a series of questions that you answer that will take you to make you a more well-rounded, that is able to use the strengths of all 4 styles. Because what do we want, guys? We want situational leadership. We want the leader to say, I'm working with Ted now, and what does he need right now, and do it. Not, well, I'm not that type of leader. I have to call in somebody else, or get a consultant or a coach or somebody. No, to be able to be, look, let's see what he needs right now and do it. That's what we call a transformational positive influence leader. Somebody's able to handle all of the situations in the moment. So does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. Now that's good. Situational leadership is the key.
Yeah.
Because the chance, not
I
every
wish you'd written
situation.
that book, by the way.
I know, right? I think was it Ken Blanchard might have beat you
Yes,
to it.
Ken Blanchard. Yes. Yeah, he's a great guy. A great guy. Yeah.
Yeah, no, but I think that's just critical because the situations aren't the same, and I think
Right.
the biggest
Yeah.
mistake you can make as a leader is trying to treat every situation the same and everybody like they're cookie cutter.
Right.
So
Yeah, I'm going to my strength. I'm, I'm shooting my jump shot from the corner every time. I know how to do.
it doesn't matter if 3 people are on me. I'm just going to shoot it. There you go.
Exactly.
No, this could for me. This is another one of those conversations that can just go on and on and on because I have so many follow ups to things like that.
Okay.
This
Bring it
is
on.
great though. But we're at the write this down segment of the
Okay.
show, and this is where we each go around and we give a takeaway or two from today's episode that we feel like everybody needs to write down so that they can level up. So,
Yeah.
Glenn, you're the guest of honor. What do the people need to write down from this episode?
Well, I'll tell you what's driven me my whole adult life, and the probably the one thing that my son remembers and repeats on a regular basis that I passed on to him, and that is you got to put the work in. Okay, you cannot go from first base to third base. You got to touch second. You have to put the work in. He said to me once, Dad, he said, Dad, I may not be the smartest person in the room, but there's no one in that room that's going to have outworked me, out prepared me for that meeting or for whatever we're doing. I remember way back in my early days, we were about to go have a meeting the next morning with a very important person. And I said to the guys that I was going with, I said, what are we going to do? What's our goals? What are we going to try to accomplish in this meeting? They, one of them said to me, oh, we'll work it out in the car on the way down. I said, no, we're going to stay here until we get a plan for what we're going to do and how we're going to do it and what roles we're going to play and the like. You got to put the work in. And that's my mantra. And nothing's coming easy. Don't be winging it. I'm sorry, it doesn't work. I'm sorry.
No, that's.
No easy answers.
But you know what? I think most people, especially when it comes to if you're leading and you're going to have conversations, most people wing it. It's like I've had coaching sessions with leaders, and I'm like, okay, I'm this person you're going to talk to. You're you. Let's go through this. And they're like, what? Huh? Yeah.
You're you.
It takes them by surprise because I think the tendency is to think, okay, I'm just going to go in and do what I do. But I agree with you. I think it's critical to put the work in.
Yeah.
And
see what
be
I got
prepared.
Here? I got my notes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm prepared for you. Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
I come prepared. Yeah.
Good. No, I think that's a great lesson.
Yeah. You know what it is also? It's respect.
Yes.
I respect what you do and what we're doing here. And that's what preparation is. It's saying, I give you respect. It's just like showing up on time.
Yes.
With respect.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's, showing respect to the other person. So, yeah, put the work in.
Put the work in. Write that down.
That's another one. Put that on a plaque also. You got to put the work in.
There you go. Good stuff. All right. So, Ted.
Mine is pretty simple, and I've, probably said it on numerous times. So hopefully when others listen to some of our other podcast episodes, he said that one before. So I'm letting you know.
All good.
I've said this before. That, I as a leader, I try to make people want to do what I need them to do.
Hmm.
I'm trying to make them want to do it,
Right.
right? And so they feel like, I want to do that. I want to do that for Ted. I want to do that for the company. I want to do that. Right. And if you can get them to want to do what you need them to do, then, it doesn't seem like they're, you're stretching them too much, or that they don't
Right.
want, they know that this is what we need to get done. It's the weekend, but guys, we gotta get this done. Like if we didn't have to, I wouldn't, do it. But if you guys are working throughout the weekend, I'm gonna be right there with you. If not, I'm gonna be bringing the donuts or something and coffee. I need you to know that I'm in this with
We're
you. What I'm
we're
asking you to do, no matter what it is, I want to make you want to do. What I need you, or what the company needs you to do.
we're in this together. Yeah.
Mhm.
What you basically said is what getting people to want to do it is, it's essentially motivation. The people are motivated to. It's different. Like I always say, there's a difference between motivation and movement. I can get you to go from here to there by doing something that will scare the hell out of you, or I can also um, bribe you into doing it. I used to do this thing to show that in a class, um, to say, you know what I want you to do now. I'm going to take my shoe off, and I want you over there to stand 10. I want you to crawl on the floor and kiss my foot.
Mm.
People say, I'm not doing that. What if I put $10 down under my foot, and if you come over and kiss me, I'll give you $10. I'm not doing it for $10. How about if I put $20 down? I'm not doing. I said, is there some amount of money that I could put down there that would get you to do that? And I guess everybody says, well, yeah, everybody's got their price. I could
Well,
get it.
yeah, but you get the right price, they'll be like, which one? Which foot? Which foot?
Which,
Yeah, $1 million.
yeah,
Which one?
but what that's movement. That's not motive. I don't want to kiss your foot, but I
Right.
might get to it
Right.
because I could use $1,000.
Sure.
But that's what I think. What just to put a fine point on your wanting to do it message, which is a great learning, I think.
No, I think I agree. I think that's a great point. And so my piece for this, so the thing to write down is I think you have to model the behavior that you expect, especially in a crisis.
Right.
One of my leadership heroes, Ted, this is going to surprise you, is Joe Gibbs. He
Mm.
was he was the coach of the Washington
Yeah.
Redskins,
Sure.
and to me, the thing that really made him successful was how he handled crisis. Right? I mean, you look at he had two instances where they were going to a strike, it was a player strike, and on the other teams, teams are crossing the picket line, and there this. Some people were playing, some people weren't, but on his teams, they stayed unified because of him. And if you notice, both of those years are when the Redskins went to the Super Bowl. The 2 years that there was a strike, or 2 years that the Redskins went to the Super Bowl, because of just him, his calming influence, keeping everybody together and leading in a crisis. And then there was a time where his best player passed away, Sean Taylor.
Right.
And that could, I mean, in most teams, that's it.
Right.
I mean, there's no recovering from your best player just dying unexpectedly. Especially if the person wasn't sick, just something happens, he gets shot.
Right.
And again, he just kept everybody together, kept everybody on the same page, empathized, the things you've been talking about on this episode. And they went on, they made a playoff run during a year where your best player dies. I mean, that's a classic example of
Right.
modeling the behaviors you expect and being an effective leader when there's a crisis.
That didn't he win the Super Bowl one of those years?
Well, he won 3 Super Bowls.
Early on, but not that year though.
Yeah,
But
not that year. That year they made a playoff run.
Right. Yeah, he
Uh,
won with Doug Williams, right?
right, right.
Yeah. Yeah. Which was
Yeah,
that was a pretty brave move, also putting Doug Williams at quarterback. Yeah, that was history making. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So
yeah,
That was a
That's,
positive influence leader. There's a good example of a positive
yes,
influence leader. Yeah.
yes, yeah. And I think that game. I mean, he started a running back who never started before and didn't tell anybody until right before they were about to kick off. He said, "Hey guys, we're gonna start Timmy."
Yeah, we're
They're
getting
like,
into the
"What?"
weed. We're
Like
getting into
who?
we're getting into the football weeds here.
Yeah, we are. But the whole point is being an effective leader during a
Yeah,
crisis
yeah,
and
exactly.
really modeling the behavior that you expect to see. And I
Right.
think when
Yeah,
you're that model, people watch you and they
right.
say, "Okay, everything's going to be okay."
Exactly. Exactly.
So write that down.
Good
All
stuff.
right.
Wait.
So Glenn, how can our followers best connect with you?
Well, there's a website called the positiveinfluenceleader.com. Positiveinfluenceleader.com. Got lots of articles and information about positive influence. Positive influence. There's also this would be interesting too. There's a blog there called Stories of Positive Influence, because when I talk to people, very often they tell me their story. Well, I want to tell you about a leader that I had. And I said, can you just write that up in like 200-300 words, not long, not an article, just a short thing. And so we have a bunch of stories about that people sent us about a positive influence leader. Um, and then we make a little comment on it as to, what type of leader this actually is. But it's some great stuff, some real personal things that I like a lot. So, yeah. So we're actually, improving the work because we want to put up more information about leadership in a crisis on the website. And we've been so busy that we haven't had a chance to update it, but it will be shortly on that site. One of the things that's going to go on the website is something that, if you don't mind, I'm going to mention it anyway. But the book Leadership in a Time of Crisis
Uh-huh.
that we've been talking about for this hour, it just won an award. It won a book award for it's called the Goody Business Book Awards, and it
Awesome.
won in the category what they the category leadership think differently. It won in that category, and we were told that that was the most competitive category, meaning I guess that they had the most entries in that category. And so we're kind of walking around feeling pretty good these days because we just found out a couple of days ago that it won this award, and so it's kind of cool. So we're pretty pleased with.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's yeah,
great.
very
That's
nice,
big.
very nice.
Mhm.
Congratulations. So I understand also you've got a special offer for our followers.
Yes, as I said, feeling pretty good. So, as I said, the positive influence leader pays it forward. If they've benefited, like you all and like I have benefited from being someone who was a positive influence on you, you tend to pay it forward by being a positive influence leader on some other people. With that theme in mind, um, what I'm going to make an offer for the first 5 people that email me with their mailing address. Of course, I will send them a complimentary signed copy of this book, Leadership in a Time of Crisis. If they agree to buy a copy of the book um, on Amazon or from our publisher, HRD Press, and pay it forward by gifting it to another person. That's not too complicated, is it? I will
Not
send
at
you
all.
a copy if you buy a copy and gift it to another person. You contact me by sending me an email to that website, Glenn, GLENN, at thepositiveinfluenceleader.com. Glenn at thepositiveinfluenceleader.com with your mailing address. And I promise your mailing address will have a one-time use when I mail it to you, and that's it. So first 5, we'll get that. So
awesome. Glenn at thepositiveinfluenceleader.com.
yes.
Okay, so we will make sure we include
Yeah.
that in the show
Right.
notes, and I
And
just
we
put
will
something in
make
the
sure,
comments.
if I get an email from Ted and you, Eric, I will have a copy sent to you guys as well.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Fantastic. I will send you
Thank
an
you.
email. Sure.
Thank you.
Now this is great. Thank you for that generous offer. Thank you for everything that you shared. I think you've equipped some people to be effective leaders during a time of crisis. And we want everybody to know, number one, don't forget to share the show.
Right.
Share the show. Share the show.
Share the show. And speaking of the show, don't forget you can go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, any of those places and listen to this episode. And don't forget to subscribe so that way you never miss a future episode. We want to thank Glenn Parker for everything he shared. This has been a fantastic episode of the 30 Minute Hour podcast. Until next time, have a great one.